It started with a knock on my door on Christmas Eve. I wasn't expecting anyone, it was snowing heavily, and my friends and family had all called earlier, assuring me they wouldn't brave the storm. I was alone, in my quiet little house on the edge of town, surrounded by nothing but the cold, white wilderness. The knock came again, 3 sharp raps, echoing through the stillness. I hesitated before answering, staring at the door like it might come alive. When I finally opened it, I found no one there. Just the snow, the wind, and a small, neatly wrapped package sitting on the doorstep. I brought the package inside, shutting the door against the icy gusts. It was wrapped in crimson paper with a gold bow, elegant yet simple. No tag, no name, just the mysterious box. Curiosity got the better of me, and I tore the paper off to reveal a small wooden box with intricate carvings. Inside was a doll. Not a cute, cuddly doll, but something that looked like it had been plucked straight from a nightmare. Its porcelain face was cracked, one glass eye slightly askew, and its dress was tattered, stained with something dark that resembled dried blood. As I lifted it out, a chill ran down my spine. Something about it felt wrong. I'm not a superstitious person, but I couldn't shake the unease that gripped me. I placed the doll on a shelf in the living room, intending to forget about it. But that night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every whisper of wind against the windows seemed amplified. And then I heard it, the faintest sound of laughter, high-pitched and childlike. I bolted upright, my heart racing. The house was dark, silent except for the occasional groan of the old floorboards. I bolted upright, my heart racing. The house was dark, silent except for the occasional groan of the old floorboards. I told myself it was my imagination, but when I crept downstairs, the doll was no longer on the shelf. It was sitting in the middle of the living room floor, its cracked face turned toward me. I stared at it, frozen. It felt like its glass eyes were watching me, following my every move. Summoning every ounce of courage, I picked it up and shoved it into a box in the attic. Out of sight, out of mind. Or so I thought. The next morning, the doll was back, sitting on the kitchen table. This time, its head was tilted at an unnatural angle, as though it had been broken and hastily repaired. I knew I hadn't brought it down. My hand shook as I carried it outside, burying it deep in the snow. But when I returned to the house, there it was, sitting on my bed. Panic set in. I tried burning it in the fireplace, but the flame seemed to avoid it, dancing around the edges without ever touching it. Desperate, I drove to the nearest town and tossed the doll into a dumpster. As I sped away, I felt a wave of relief. But that night, it was back, sitting in my rocking chair, gently swaying as though an invisible force pushed it. The whispers started after that. Soft, unintelligible murmurs that grew louder every night. I'd wake up to find scratches on the walls, cryptic messages scrawled in what looked like ash. Mine. Forever. The doll's face seemed to change too, its twisted grin growing wider, its eyes more lifelike. By Christmas morning, I was a wreck, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. The whispers had turned into screams, echoing through the house. I couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing a hammer, I smashed the doll to pieces. But as the shards hit the floor, the screams stopped, replaced by a deep, guttural laugh. I haven't slept since. Every time I close my eyes, I see it, the doll, whole again, waiting for me. And I know it's only a matter of time before it comes back. Growing up, we had a family tradition of picking out the perfect Christmas tree. Every year, my parents and I would drive out to the same tree farm, wandering through the rows of evergreens until we found the one. But last year, I decided to start a new tradition of my own. It was my first Christmas in my new house, far from the small town where I'd grown up. I found a local tree farm online and drove out there on a crisp December afternoon. The place was picturesque, with neatly lined rows of towering pines and a light dusting of snow covering the ground. An elderly man greeted me at the entrance, his weathered face framed by a thick scarf. Looking for a tree, he asked, his voice raspy but warm. I nodded, and he gestured toward the far end of the lot. Best ones are out there. Take your time. I wandered through the trees, savoring the fresh pine scent. Most of the trees were beautiful, but none of them felt right. And then I saw it. A massive, majestic fir standing apart from the others, its branches heavy with snow. It was perfect. I flagged down the man, and he helped me cut it down and load it into my truck. As we secured it, he gave me a strange look. "You've got a good eye," he said. "That tree's been here a long time. Why hasn't anyone else taken it?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "Superstition, I suppose. Folks around here think it's cursed. But that's just old stories." I laughed nervously, brushing off his comment. Cursed or not, the tree was coming home with me. That night, as I decorated it with lights and ornaments, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The room felt colder than usual, and the shadows cast by the tree seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally. But I told myself it was just my imagination. The first incident happened around midnight. I woke to the sound of soft rustling, like someone moving through the branches. Groggy, I stumbled into the living room, expecting to find an animal that had hitched a ride home with the tree. But the room was empty, and the rustling stopped as soon as I entered. Over the next few nights, the noises grew louder. Scratching, whispering, faint giggles that made my skin crawl. The tree seemed to move. Ornaments would shift positions, and the lights would flicker, even when the rest of the house stayed bright. One morning, I found deep gouges in the wooden floor beneath the tree, as though its roots had grown and clawed into the ground. I tried ignoring it, convincing myself it was all in my head. But on Christmas Eve, everything escalated. The whispers became voices, clear and menacing. "You took me. You can't escape." The shadows around the tree writhed, taking on grotesque shapes. Terrified, I decided to get rid of it. Dragging the tree outside, I doused it in lighter fluid and set it ablaze. As the flames consumed it, the voices turned into screams, piercing and inhuman. And then, just as suddenly as they started, they stopped. The tree was gone, reduced to ash. But the house hasn't felt the same since. The shadows linger, and sometimes, late at night, I still hear the whispers. I think I brought something back with that tree, something that doesn't want to leave. I've always loved Christmas carolers. There's something magical about a group of strangers coming together to sing holiday songs, spreading cheer to everyone who hears them. So when a group showed up at my door last Christmas Eve, I was thrilled. There were 4 of them, dressed in old-fashioned clothes that looked straight out of a Victorian postcard. Their voices were hauntingly beautiful, harmonizing perfectly as they sang Silent Night. I stood in the doorway, mesmerized, until they finished. "Thank you," I said, clapping. That was amazing. The tallest of the group stepped forward, his face pale and expressionless. "We have more songs," he said, his voice cold and flat. I hesitated. It was late, and the air had a strange heaviness to it. But I didn't want to be rude, so I nodded. "Sure, one more." They began singing again, this time a song I didn't recognize. The melody was slow and mournful, the lyrics foreign and guttural. It sent a shiver down my spine. As they sang, their faces seemed to change. Their eyes darkened, their skin growing ashen. The air around them grew colder, and I realized my breath was visible in the doorway. "I think that's enough," I said, my voice trembling. But they didn't stop. Their voices grew louder, more discordant, echoing in my ears until I thought my head would split. Slamming the door, I locked it and backed away, my heart racing. But the singing didn't stop. It grew louder, as if they were inside the house. I checked every room, every corner, but I was alone. Yet the music followed me, filling every space. By morning, the singing had stopped, but the house felt wrong. The mirrors were all cracked, the lights flickering uncontrollably. And outside, in the snow, I found footprints leading to my door. Facets, deep and unmistakable. But that was only the beginning. Over the following days, I began noticing strange things around the house. Doors would open and close on their own. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway at all hours of the night. The caroler song played faintly in the background of everything I did, like a radio station I couldn't turn off. It was maddening. One night, I woke up to find my bedroom door wide open. Standing at the end of the hallway were the carolers. Their pale faces were almost translucent in the moonlight, and their mouths moved in perfect unison, though no sound came out. I froze, too terrified to move. Slowly, they began walking toward me, their feet gliding soundlessly across the floor. I slammed the door shut and locked it, but I could still hear them outside, their haunting melody growing louder. Desperate, I barricaded myself in the room, stacking furniture against the door. But the song seeped through the walls, growing louder and louder until I thought my eardrums would burst. When I finally emerged the next morning, the house was in shambles. The walls were covered in strange, dark symbols, and every mirror was shattered. On the dining table, I found a note written in elegant, old-fashioned script. It read, "We will return." I left the house that day and never went back. But every Christmas Eve, I hear their song again, faint and distant at first, but growing louder as the night wears on. And I know, no matter how far I run, they will find me. They always do.